Pidgeot Control is a deck that has been succeeding throughout recent regionals, and is shown to be a top contender for a player's deck choice when attending any major event, and even a deck people should come prepared for. I'm Malachi Ryder, and I'm a 2-year competitive Pokemon TCG player who has shown success with Pidgeot Control in the Louisville, Kentucky Regional Championship, as well as having immense success within the online tournament community. I have spent hours playing and learning Pidgeot Control, and the one variant I have enjoyed the most is the one that consists of Snorlax. This list has a lot of versatility and options for how many resources you force out of your opponent through locking them through the Snorlax's block ability, or even an infamous Saw Block from Wellspring Ogerpon, or Tempting Trap from Mawile. I've been asked by some on when I plan to make a masterclass for Pidgeot Snorlax, and so I decided to take some time to make this video to go into detail on exactly what the deck has to its disposal, why I would recommend playing this deck, as well as just a general summary to each of your matchups. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed, or even shared the video to any friends or family, as I try my best to make these videos the best quality I can, to give you the best information needed to be well prepped for your next event, whether you're wanting to play against or as Control. Thank you for tuning in, and let's begin. So, Pidgeot Control's main strength lies within its capability to capitalize on your opponent's deck weaknesses and denying them of each of their win cons as consistently as possible. The fundamental core every card game has is that each deck just has an inherent weakness alongside its strength, whether that's like Regidrago VSTAR's weakness to being heavily aggressed by decks like Raging Bolt or Turbo Moon, or Charizard EX, whose weakness is their opponent taking a major lead in board control through multi-KO turns from cards like Radiant Greninja or even Kyurem with its Trifrost attack. Control decks are intended to take advantage of weak points the deck has through unconventional patterns such as retreat locking, denying your opponent of their main attackers, discarding cards from your opponent's deck/hand until they run out, or even winning the prize race. Some major win cons that you have with Pidgeot Control is that you have retreat locking option through Snorlax's block ability, Wellspring Ogerpon's Sob attack with the double turbo energy, or even Mawile's Tempting Trap attack. This win con's goal is just to take a setup Pokemon that either your opponent is unable to attack with or has a very low damage output and just trap it into active until they are unable to move it, which leads to them being unable to win because they aren't able to take any more prizes. And you win the game through eventually decking them out. Some cards that support this win con are like Accompanying Flute or Erica's Invitation, which look to pull Pokemon from your opponent's hand or deck that your opponent might not be able to normally bench or might not normally bench in that matchup, giving you the potential win con to retreat lock as you might have pulled out a Pokemon that they didn't want on board that you can lock. Another win con that Pidgeot Control could play towards is hand/deck control, since there are a lot of cards that allow you to control what resources your opponent's left with in their hand or deck, specifically trainers though. Luxury V specializes in this by stripping your opponent's hand of any resources they might have had with the Fang Step attack, which allows you to discard one of any trainer card from your opponent's hand. Or you have the dynamic trio of Eerie, Misfortune Sisters, and Xerosic's Machinations. Eerie allows you to discard 2 of any item cards from your opponent's hand, and Misfortune Sisters allows you to take a look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard any items you find there. Then there's Xerosic's Machinations, which makes your opponent discard cards from the hand until they just have 3 remaining. These cards combine to force your opponent into a position where they are left with no resources in their hand, and you are given more turns in order to set up a lock for yourself or continue to prevent your opponent from playing the game in the first place. You're also able to cycle these cards with cards like Palpad or Regilecki, which allows you to grab your trainer from your discard pile and put it back into your hand. This essentially allows you to go infinite and cycle these hand and deck control trainers as much as you please without any repercussions. One of the other ways you can win the game with Pidgeot Control is, funnily enough, taking prize cards. Blood Moon Ursaluna is a phenomenal mid to late game attacker that is able to be combined with Iono, Countergain, and Countercatcher to take advantage of a very narrow board states to turn the prize trade in your favor while taking away potentially your opponent's main attacker. This win con is specifically used for when you're unable to take control over the game to deny your opponent of their win con. So you either have to KO the Pokemon that is denying you of the control win con, or take initiative in the prize race and win the game by taking all your prizes before your opponent can take theirs. Pidgeot Control is a deck that is a jack of all trades, as it has the ability to use all these pressure points while slowly locking your opponent down until they are incapable of playing the game anymore and are stripped of each of their win cons. I'll be using this deck list for Pidgeot Snorlax as a sample list for the rest of this video, go into detail on what deck this deck has to its exposure, and I will later go on into potential other cards you could add to the deck and what the cuts would be. Now you might be wondering why I'm recommending Pidgeot Control. The reason I'm recommending it is because I just think it's a deck that does its job really, really well and is able to capitalize on more or like less experienced players and take advantage of the misplays that they might make, while also putting up a really good fight against more top level players. Control just has a lot of ways to deny your opponents of like so many resources right now, and there's not a lot that can be done about it, and so you're able to take wins a lot more freely from opponents who might misplay a little bit harder because they're just not as experienced with it, but then you're still winning top tables or you're winning at the top tables because the deck is just so powerful at what it does that I just think that it's so well versed. And I also just think it's a really good spot in the meta, as well as having that surprise factor if your opponent doesn't know your exact 60. So I think just with all that combination, I think it's just a really good pick for the current metagame right now and any future major events you might go to. And I would heavily recommend it to anybody looking to get into Pidgeot or just getting like or finding a good deck that they want to bring to a regional. I just really think Pidgeot Control is really good, and I hope that this video is able to show you why I think it's so good. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get into the matchups. Let's start off with Regidrago. So Regidrago is admittedly a pretty shaky matchup, but the main goal is just to get a Pokemon that you can lock while denying their switch outs, whether that's through just discarding them or preventing them from playing them. Genesect is crucial in this matchup as it is what prevents your opponent from playing Prime Catcher, and it is worthy to note that Jamming Tower does not stop Genesect's ability, so you should not be afraid of them dropping a Jamming Tower. The usual game plan is just early game start Vision for liabilities alongside Fang Snipes, just so you can get a good look at their hand and slow down their pop-up turn potentially, so you have more time to set up the retreat lock. Another good card for this matchup that I think is Mist Energy to protect your Pidgeot from Dragapult, or even just protect your Genesect for like a setup Dragapult turn, where they go Dragapult 50 on Genesect and then 1 on Fez, and then take a triple prize knockout turn. Mist also allows you to kind of go Mimiwall if they are out of colognes, but I rarely recommend that WinCon because it's not always feasible. Lost Vacuum does help with this matchup with making Mist Energy more effective, since you can Lost Vacuum your opponent's Temple of Sinnoh so they cannot Legacy Star it back. The ideal retreat lock options are usually Squawkabilly, Kyurem, or Cleffa, but sometimes you're able to retreat lock their Ogerpons depending on how many energy they have on board. Next up, we have Charizard Pidgeot. Now, Charizard can be a tricky matchup for newer control players, but TM Devo is what makes or breaks this matchup, and what makes it so, or what I like to classify as a moderately easy matchup. Your entire goal is really just to Eerie Misfortune Sisters or Candies away and set up a massive Devo turn, so that they're out of ways to attack with Charizard, and you cannot be threatened by anything. Milling their candies with Super Rods or Stretchers also just means there's less Dusknoir and Dusclops pops, which is one of the main things that makes this matchup very shaky. So it's really great if you're able to deny them of as many Dusknoir or Dusclop pops as you can, because really the early game is just trying to survive a bunch of Dusknoir and Dusclops. And then, so the rest of the game is really just trying to get good Devos, like in looping that with Eerie and Sisters. Xerosix is insanely good in this matchup, just because they're going to be instant-charging a lot of the early game. And so they're averaging maybe like 8 to 10 cards in hand at least the first turn or first 2 turns. And so if you're able to Xerosix them, that limits their Ultra Balls, that forces them to Forest Seal Stone, potentially, and it also just limits how many Dusknoirs that they can use in the early game, because they're not like going off of a very big hand. They have a 3-card hand. So they're either going to instant charge again, where you can follow up with another Xerosix, or you can just go like for more direct ones like Eerie or Misfortune Sisters. Luxray is also really good to combo with Xerosix, because you can go Xerosix and then Luxray and just discard one of their very important trainers that they kept in hand, whether that's an Arven or they kept a rare candy, a Super Rod. There's a lot of different things that you could really get good value off with Luxray.
But it's also good to make sure that you're doing this in a situation where they can't threaten the knockout next turn. Charmeleon is also a Pokemon that you have to worry about, as Devo doesn't affect it. So if they do evolve over Melian with Zard, you can usually go Blustery Wind with DTE on a Pidgeot to soak 100 on the Charizard and then set up a Devo turn. That way you can get rid of their Charizard and Charmeleon. And you're also, like, taking away their Pidgeot out. You're taking away a lot of stuff if they do that line. Usually what you want to do is you want to Devo, and they'll have a Charmeleon in the back, and then force them to evolve that Charmeleon so that you can set up that play. And then if you can't comfortably Blustery Wind, you could just sit behind Mimi and, like, try to get the rest of their candies down so they can't heavy Dusknoir, and your Mimi becomes even harder to get through. Because if they want to get through it, they have to attack with Charmeleon. And that's hard to do without retreating the Charizard that they're attacking with, or Turrowing it, which if they're Turrowing it, Retreat Lock becomes the better win con. And it just becomes very awkward for the Zard. So progress the game state from there. Next up, we have Archaludon EX. So Archaludon can be a shaky matchup, but it has a lot of, like, exploits that you can take advantage of. Sandshrew and Genesect do make this matchup a lot easier because it cuts their scoop-up count in half, since you're preventing them from using Palpad to shuffle back their Turros, and you're also denying them a scoop-up Cyclone. And remember, Jamming Tower does not shut off Genesect, so they're never going to be able to use scoop-up Cyclone again unless they knock out the Genesect. And their deck is just also very vulnerable to, like, good Fang Snipe, since their only real draw engine is supporters and Fez. So being able to, like, Fang Snipe away a research really is a detriment to them. The goal, really, though, is just to try, like, early Fang Snipes while setting up Shrew and Genesect and prioritizing getting a liability out, such as, like, Radiant Greninja or Relicanth, alongside just trying to discard their Turo and Thorin. If they take an early KO, you can countercatcher or boss up any of their benched Duraludons and then lock those to buy yourself some time because of how heavy the retreat cost is. So it's very difficult for them to be able to, like, establish, like, a way to get out of the active. So that gives you a few turns to go Fang Snipe. If this doesn't work out, though, which sometimes it just doesn't work out, Ursaluna Loop plus Iono is a really great combo because they have trouble clapping back from an Iono, especially if they don't have a Pheasantipity in play. So just trying to, like, Ursaluna Loop in the end is a very efficient win con to try and play towards. It is good to prioritize Fez and then their Dialga if you go for the Ursaluna Loop, since Dialga is the only Pokemon that can KO you with his Star Chronos alongside its first attack. Next up, we got Gardevoir. And Gardevoir is one of those interesting matchups. I personally like it, and it is really easy to beat if you generally know what to do. It's only scary if, like, the Gardevoir player is, like, an exceptionally good Gardevoir player. Retreat locking is going to be the primary goal, and you usually want to spread out their energy or force their Turo out until you can find something that does minimal damage that you can lock, such as the Klefki. And some of the outliers are, of course, like Manaphy and Greninja, but, like, other really good Pokemon that you can retreat lock are actually Klefki, Fluttermane, and Mawile, as they either don't do a lot of damage or are a 3 energy commitment, which hinders their energy count heavily, so it allows you to lock a lot more stuff than you originally would have been able to, like Kirlia's, potentially, like, Monkey Dory. Monkey Dory is also a really good retreat lock option. But, like, it just generally allows you to, like, lock some more stuff like Kirlia's and stuff, since they'll have so much energy committed onto this, it's hard for them to get this other guy at the active. Once they burn their Turo, you have Sandshrew to deny Palpad, so it's hard for them to ever get out of the lock that they were put in. But it is still good to try and fish for their pad to discard a Shrew can get killed by Monkey Dory, as well as shut off by Klefki. Luxury is still good early, but a Pokemon that you can attack with, if they don't go wide with Kirlias, is Pheasantipity, actually, as it allows you to bench snipe lone Kirlias to deny them of getting their Gardevoir easily, and they can't bench Manaphy or it gets retreat locked. So it's a lose-lose situation, basically. It's also a good note that you can Fez Knight their Guardy and then TM Devo them in order to limit their Guardy outs next turn, since you can pair it with Iono. The matchup can be scary against a good Guardy player, like I said, but retreat locking is typically sufficient enough to beat them. Next up, we got Gholdengo. Now, Gholdengo is a deck that is very vulnerable to hand disruption, specifically item disruption, since this entire deck kind of revolves around his energy retrievals. Genesect is good into this matchup because it slows down their burst turn with Energy Search Pro, and then you can start chaining Fang Snipes as well as Eerie, Misfortune Sisters, or Zerosigs. The gameplay is really just to remove as many retrievals from their game as possible, or good supporters, and either set up Retreat Lock on Manaphy and Greninja, or just sit behind Mimikyu until they deck out. Most Gholdengo lists do have Colognes, so just make sure you do not go Limb Mimikyu, or they can easily kind of punish that if you don't discard their Cologne. This matchup is scary if they pop off, but it is insanely easy to just exploit them. Next up, we have Miraidon, and I love this matchup. This is probably one of my favorite matchups to hit right now. Just because the common lists that are being played right now, they don't have an answer to Mimikyu with Mist Energy and Defiance Vest, because that just covers all the bases of winning that matchup. They can never hit you with Mew because of Mist Energy, and then their Magneton doesn't do any damage either because it maxes out at 40 damage. So, you end up blocking all that with Defiance Vest. And some lists do play Minior, but that doesn't do any damage either. So, you always win when you set up that wall. If your opponent pulls out a Zapdos, though, or another single prizer to get around Mimikyu, you can start using Blood Moon or Saluna to kill off that Pokemon and then go back to walling. The matchup is very chill, and it's easy to lock them out of the game. If you have to retreat lock your opponent, like you can't get the Mist Defiance Vest option off, it's best to target down the Pikachu, Latias, Squawkabilly, or Lumineon as the primary lock targets. So next on the list, I have Raging Bolt. Now, Raging Bolt, I kind of classify as like a slightly harder Miraidon, but Snorlax can make it a little easier. The general goal is that you're wanting to set up Genesect because you want to shut off the Prime Catcher and just limit it to 2 switch outs, and then you're just aiming to retreat lock either an Ogerpon or a liability like Squawkabilly or Greninja. Eerie Snipes and Misfortune Sister Snipes are usually ideal as you want to fish for their carts as well as just Pokemon catchers because you want to limit as many gusts as they have. And then using Erika's or Flute to get Greninja or Squawkabilly are usually ideal. And Sentry does help limit their gust outs as well. If you can fill their board of 2 prizers and lock them out of Slitherwing, Mimikyu does become a win con, but that is relatively difficult to pull off, so I don't recommend that as like a primary win con to go for, but if you're able to pull it off, it definitely is a win con that you can look towards. You can also pull off that Mimikyu win con if you're able to discard all of their stretchers and kill their Slitherwing, because then they don't have a way to get it back. But make sure if you're going to do this, you're able to, you get lucky on the stretchers and then you go narrow in your board state. Otherwise, they're going to be able to like take too many prize cards before you can reliably do that. Ursaluna can be a last resort in this matchup, but usually that is hard to squeeze because of Bravery Charms, so you just really want to try to force retreat lock win con and you should be fine. On the list, I now have Dragapult Iron Thorns, and this is easily one of my most scuffed matchups. The best way that I found to win this matchup is you send up Mimikyu, and while their Thorns is active, and force them to retreat it with Booster Capsule, like the Future Booster Capsule, and then your goal is to just try to Lost Vacuum away that Future Booster Capsule, and then you're going to counter catcher back up the Iron Thorns. The reason being is because it's a 4 retreat cost Pokemon, and it's really easy to lock up active without having to retreat lock, and you can just sit behind Mimikyu, and they can't really hit it, and they only play 2 Boss and a Turo, so they would have to burn their Turo, which is not great for them, for the Thorns, or they would have to burn one of their 2 bosses, in order to get around the Mimikyu. Either way, it's not great for them. And you just want to use this time to like use Flute or Erika's to target down more Thorns or even Toadscool, because Toadscool is a really good target to lock in this matchup. And the matchup really is just that back and forth of like gusting Thorns, hoping it sticks, try to get some more lock targets on the board. But the matchup is not easy. Your best bet also, you can also like Genesect them. to lock them out of trolley, which can slow them down a good bit. So if you need to buy some more time and you have that with the Genesect, it's definitely not bad to try and go for. But yeah, really it's just like Mimikyu Wall, hope that you can lock a Thorns, try to get some more Thorns to play or get a Toedscool to play, and then just try to play for Retreat Lock. You rarely can go for taking prize cards. The only time you want to take prize cards is if they start a Dreepy and they're evolving Dracloaks one by one. If they have multiple Dracloaks set up, it's probably not best, but if they have like one Dracloak and a Dreepy, then you probably go start like KOing Pokemon. But that's very rare. Now, for Snorlax Stall, I really don't have to say much, because this is just an auto-win matchup. You just spam Regidrago and spam Xerosix until you can Iona them to deck them out. You can also just, like, go in a cycle and just, like, go Xerosix, Iona, Xerosix, Iona, Xerosix, Iona. And that's a more efficient way to probably deck them out. Luxray is also good in this matchup. Just make sure you attach 2 double turbos, because you don't want to be doing damage to a Snorlax if they have fan on, like, handheld fan on them, since that will move the double turbo, and then you're just locked, and then your Luxray's locked. The only tip for this matchup that's like really important besides that is just never go into Pidgeot, because if you go into Pidgeot, you're giving them a good target to lock with Snorlax, and so you don't ever really want to give them that. And so if you can help it, you just want to like kind of stick with the Regidrago and Luxray and just try to whittle them down through those. Next up, we have Turbo Roaring Moon. I think Turbo Moon is our hardest matchup in the current meta. Just because it's one of the best aggro decks that has answers to a lot of our or a lot of our responses to aggro decks because of Petrun alone. Your ideal game plan though is just try to set up Ursaluna early and just spam the Ursaluna loop with Iona. You could try to prioritize killing Petrun because you have the off chance of being able to lock their board out of their Petrun, and then you can go for a Retreat Lock. But the typical game plan is just like Iona with Ursaluna and just loop that and just hope it sticks. If you can Eerie or Miss Fortress Sisters, you want to prioritize their stretchers because that limits how many times they can recur their Petrun, and you want to make the Retreat Lock as feasible as possible because of how unfeasible the Bear Loop is. Genesect and Sandshrew do help out with this matchup, just limit their A-Spec, whether it's on Fair Stamp or Prime Catcher, and then Sandshrew just limits their boss cycle, so they're limited down to 1 boss, and they have to use their Pokemon catchers as their priority gust. And now we've reached a mirror match, and let me just say, the control mirror is admittedly a headache. But what I found to be most efficient is just trying to establish Fang Snipes early and getting a good Devo turn off on their Pidgeot. You just want to deny them as many outs to resources while you strip away the very few ones that they have. Sandshrew also makes this matchup harder for your opponent, just because you deny their Pal Pads. And the goal really, just to strip in as many resources as you can before they can do that to you. Mist on Pidgeot is good to prevent their Devo, and really the match is just whoever maintains the lockdown harder will win the match overall. There's really not much to it. That's it. So just you want to try to like establish that lock down a lot quicker than your opponent, and if you can, you're likely going to win most of the time. Now we move on to Klawf Terapagos. I think that this is a weird matchup, but it's pretty winnable. So really you want to prioritize going for early vacuum loop. Like you want to loop your Lost Vacuum with Regidrago, and try to get rid of as many capsules as they'll let you. And then you want to set up an Ursaluna Iona loop. Sometimes they're not going to just like keep going, like attach capsule, so you're not gonna be able to always like get rid of all their capsules, but any capsule that you can get rid of is better than none. And because sometimes they will just like not attach a capsule and just go like Terapagos swing. And you could just respond to this with like Ursaluna Iono. And you usually, depending on the board state, you want to prioritize either their Latias, their Brute Bonnet, or the Fezzidipity. It all depends on board state. My recommendation is if you like Ursaluna Iono, you target the Fez if it's on board. If it's not on board, or you target the Latias if Fez is on board. Or you target Latias if Fez is not on board, and then if Brute Bonnet has a capsule attached, usually you want to prioritize that. But otherwise, you prioritize one of the two other Pokemon. Because the deck just has a tough time getting out of Disruption. And so whatever you're able to do to like prevent them from getting out of that disruption as much as possible, or like having an out next turn to what they need, is usually the best bet for you. So usually it's like prioritize Brute with Capsule, then Fez, then Latias. But if there's no Brute with Capsule, then you can prioritize Fez and then Latias. That's the gist of the matchup. Next up, we got Lugia. This is a very difficult matchup to learn, especially since I don't play Giacomo. The goal, though, is you just want to set up Ursaluna early, because Ursaluna is kind of going to be your bread and butter for this matchup, and you want to target down either their Archeops or their Cinccino's. This all depends on how much energy they already have set up on the Cinccino. If they don't really have any, you could prioritize the Archeops, but if they are setting it up already slightly, then you could probably then you want to prioritize the Rat. Another big thing about this matchup is pay attention to how many jet energies they're down, because if they are down at least 3 to 4, you can start looking and eyeing a retreat lock option. And you can like retreat lock something like Iron Hands, Squawkabilly, Lumineon. The reason I say Iron Hands is because you can lock it, then force their legacy energy, and then you can make Lumineon a retreat lock option. But really, most of the time, you're probably just going to go Ursaluna loop. Because they don't have anything that can one-shot Ursaluna outside of Cinccino. So if you're able to KO both of their Cincinos, it's usually fine. And then just comboing it with Iono is pretty sufficient. And it's hard for them to kind of get out of that loop. Next up, we got Ancient Box. I think this matchup is really easy, just because of how slow the deck can be to set up anything for itself. The game plan is just early Fang Snipes from Luxray, and you just Fang Snipe all of their good trainers and play Sandshrew so they can't get back the Ancient trainers. And then you can either go Retreat Lock or Ursaluna Loop. It just depends on like how their deck list is built. If they play Petulant, then you want to try to get rid of their Night Stretchers so that you can go KO the Petulant and then Retreat Lock. But if they don't have Petulant, then you can immediately go Retreat Locking. And some liabilities are stuff like Fluttermane, Greninja, or Great Tusk. Those are usually the best bets for Retreat Locking, and usually you should be able to get away with that. Not a lot of lists do play Petulant, but if they do, then you just want to prioritize getting rid of their Stretchers and then KO the Petulant. If they end up Great Tusk milling you in the early game, just send up Regilecki and just keep grabbing back Palpad and just Palpad back supporters. Reason being is because now they're realistically only milling like 2 cards. And so you slow down how many they're milling, and you make it a lot harder for them to deck you out before they run out of the Ancient Trainers, and eventually they're going to go down to just discarding 1, and then you're gaining from Palpad, and you could just keep Regilecki looping that, and then you could just keep doing that if they keep trying for the Great Tusk. Next on my list, I have Palkia Noctowl. Now, this matchup is very scary because they play essentially 4 switch outs through Prime Catcher, Kieran, Switch, and Thornton. But the best route that I found to win this matchup is really just to target the Noctowls for Retreat Lock and forcing their energy spread on their Owls until they run out of switches. Genesect does shut off the Prime, and locking Noctowl prevents their Thornton, so it essentially cuts their switch outs down to 2. And so as long as you're able to get through, like, the switch outs that they do have, you should be able to lock them out of the game. And, like, Misfortune Sisters, Eerie, if you're able to discard any of their switches, that's great. That makes the matchup a lot easier. Do note that they play Cologne, so Snorlax is really awkward to go for as an early lock. So Malwa and Ogre Punch should be your main options for retreat lockers in this matchup. Now, some cards that you can, like, swap into the list and, like, cut some stuff for. If you want to respect Lugia a little bit more, you can cut the Vacuum for a Giacomo. I think that if you want to make the Lugia matchup a little bit more favored, Giacomo is definitely a best way to put it, because you can start going Regilecki, Giacomo loop, once you've killed, like, their, both of their Archeops. And it just makes the matchup a lot easier, because, like, also just having a good, like, special energy discard just makes the matchup a lot harder for them, and you get a little bit of leeway on what you can do. And then I also have, you can replace the Snorlaxes and Sandshrew with a 1/1 Melodic line and the Radiant Serena. The reason I say this is a lot better for the Gardevoir matchup specifically. So if you feel like you're going to face a lot of Gardevoir, I definitely recommend those cuts and those replacements. And I think, but the only other matchup that I think Melodic, like, really, really helps in it is going to be the Archaludon matchup, because that just completely turns off their Turo and their Scoop Up Cyclone. Just basically turns their Thornton into their only Scoop Up, essentially. And those are the only cuts that I would make. Everything else has felt pretty fine. If you have any other cuts that you want to do, try it out and see how it feels.
That's going to do it from me. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I hope that this guide was very insightful and helpful for getting into Pidgeot Control and learning some of its matchups. If you have any other matchups that you want me to go over, let me know in the comments, and I can and I'll try to reply to them all as best as I can in regards to what matchup you ask about. And I hope this what this guide was very insightful. And if you like this and you want to support what I do, just, you can like, subscribe, share it with some friends and family, as that helps me more than anything. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much, and I will see y'all next time. Take it easy.